Right. Welcome back, Shailesh. And now we'll be speaking about the next topic, which is kind of a burning issues of these elections, and it has been a burning issue for quite some time now. And that's about the housing and the social welfare and how it is impacting the
Mm,
employment status. I
mm.
do know that the employment rates, our employment rates are pretty good compared to the other OECD countries.
Yeah.
However, having said that,
Mm,
what's your take on the comparative analysis of the different parties
yeah.
on the housing trend, and how they are promoting the social welfare, and what do you think is going to be an impact on the employment?
Absolutely. Let me come back to the first topic is housing, because that is was the pressing needs of most of the people, particularly after the floods that was affected in Auckland and all around New Zealand. It was affected by the floods, Gabriel, that came at the start of the year. And it was very unfortunate to see the economy again after COVID again slumping down because of that. So that's a double shock effect for for a government to handle, or for us as a country to handle that. So housing has been a pressing, and all the listeners who are listening, many people lost their houses to the red sticker and a green sticker, and many people after 6 7 months also have not been able to go into back into their own houses, and that's a real issue that currently we are having. And so if all listeners have to understand that the policies that are done, or the deals, or every political party is coming to help these vulnerable people who are in real problems. It is like, remembering the earthquake zone houses in Christchurch a few years ago. It's exactly like that situation where people don't have houses to live. So if you don't have houses, or uncertainty in houses, what are the stability rate is going to be, or mental health, or even the education for the kids, when they can't even stay in a stable home. And that's a real worry. So currently what we have seen is like the government has come up with, I think, 50% buyout for those flood affected. So that's a good move. That's at least for some consideration with conjunction with Auckland Council, so that they both will fund to bring back the people who have lost their homes, and at least get some sort of certainty for them that their house is not completely. But there are many people who have bought their houses in a zone where the value is quite high, but that value they may not get it. All those things are there. But again, it's a human choice that we want to buy somewhere which is high cost or whatever. That's up to us. But in these natural calamities, natural disasters, it is very hard for any government or council to really go after your choices, but they can only do whatever they can do, the bare minimum. But I think they still have done a better job in this regard, I personally feel, but I'm not sure. Most of the people might be feeling that it's not good enough, because just like COVID, it was not good enough when they paid wage subsidy, or when they paid resurgent, it wasn't enough. And that's the thing. But again, the survival to growth is the most important thing. So at least from that point of view, something has happened in terms of housing. Now, what other political parties are going to do with those better than that, they will have to see, are they giving any better deals than the current government? So if the current government says we will fund 50%, are the other parties saying 60, 70, 80, or what? They haven't come up with anything, Shirali, according to my knowledge that I have seen so far. So the only policy that they have come out is the current government, which is trying to help them. So again, that's up to the listeners to understand and go into detail about their issues and certain circumstances that they are into, to look into the housing aspect. But the other aspect is very important, because if National Party is saying that we will bring the foreign buyers into the housing, so that that could create a lot of different dynamics. It could create, again, the house prices go up. It would also create more speculation. It would also create lots of other things. But again, that is if is a not yet done deal. But then you are going to put those policies in front of you before you go to vote. Because what if this happens? So we don't know when you vote, what if that government wins or not, but you still have to exercise your vote. And that's the thing that they have to come up with an answer about their own, whether they should vote a political party who is bringing back the foreign overseas, or they have to go with this flow with the current government who is just going to, who has already made the policy of not no foreign bias. So housing will be completely, but at this moment lots of changes with the banks, houses, that's inflation is there and it's goes hand in hand. The most important thing is we want to cut down the inflation. Now, which party is going to cut down the inflation? It is going down, but it is not going down as considerably. All the voters need to understand that if any change in government, will they be able to change overnight the inflation? That's $1 million question for everyone to understand before they vote. And if they are not going to get any changes, and if they are going to get all these cuts and all sorts of things, then they have to understand and listen to all the policies before they make an informed decision. That's what my view would be. The other thing I would say that even in terms of housing, the most important thing is, the insurances related to the houses. Now the whole dynamics of insurances are going to be changed. And I think what Act is proposing is the insurances is all depends on the individual, and there is no intervention of the government. So if and that's a little bit vulnerable for the people, that if government is not going to look into the insurances, then they are left on their own. Whereas here, just like the earthquake happened, insurances, the government worked with the insurances company to make sure that they pay out something to the people. So that's a big critical thing. With insurances are very, very going to be very dynamics and different with the policies that are coming up with different political parties. So I think that's, they have to understand the insurance of their houses is going to change, is going to go
Yep.
up. And that's where they have to see what policies will affect them or what policies will protect them to cover that. As we saw during floods, lots of insurance companies were not able to fully
Yep.
fund, and there were
I,
lots of issues, you
I
know.
think what I think I remember reading an article, when these floods happened, that the insurance companies were
Mm,
hiring staff from overseas, and they said that
correct.
we got inundated with the request, and it will take us years to complete, all the claims which have come
Yeah,
through, and they were like, in a really bad position. So,
yeah,
and I do remember, if you would have noticed in the housing market, a lot of people are selling their houses in Auckland, the apartments especially,
absolutely,
for
absolutely.
very cheap rates, because the maintenance, the costs have gone up so drastically. Three
Mm,
times is what one of them told me, that three times it has gone up, and they're like, we can't afford, even if we are renting it out, we can't afford. So
absolutely. Mm,
that's quite, and as you said, if they bring in the foreign investors, people buying, which is good in a way, but I don't think it's good for our public as of now. Like, we are
The
just going to have
problem,
a,
with the problem that with that is, Shirali, is like at the moment nobody wants to sell their houses in a situation where they
yeah,
don't have houses. So why, listeners and everyone has to understand, do you want to sell your house to get a market price better so that you can sell to overseas and you can go? But how many people wants to sell their houses and go? There are lots of people who wants to still stay in New
yeah,
Zealand.
yeah. So it's a very difficult situation. Like,
Yeah.
it's a buyer's market, but it's a very like heartbreaking. I've seen some personally, some
Mm,
examples of where people had to sell a drastic sale, because they just couldn't afford it, going back to rentals. Like, so it's a bit tight situation. So I'm going to like have keenly observe this foreign investors thing,
yeah,
which happens, and is it going to like push the market back to
the
its how
market.
it was, or is it going to like the high of the market, is it designed to be high, or is it actual high? There is a difference
Yeah,
between
yeah.
those two things. So
Yeah.
We will have a we'll have to just wait and watch. I guess around that particular
Yeah,
thing.
I think for me, if I ask me, like, I might want to sell my house and go and get a price. But if I go to another country, it's gonna be the same situation there. Inflation is everywhere. Inflation and
Yeah, yeah, we
living
are.
is
Yeah,
everywhere.
it's a global thing. Yeah.
We are not experiencing, there is no country in the current world that we want to say that, okay, this is, I will save this much and I will save that much. It's not gonna be, that's
No,
clear.
right now we are in survival phase. I would still say we are growing, but I would
Mm.
still say that we call it technical recession as the word was. But
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah.
we are still in a survival position. So it's going to take some
Mm.
more time, especially for a small country like ours to get back
Absolutely.
on its feet. So that is something
Mm.
interesting. I think, and that's where the kick in comes, Shalish, about the social welfare, which
Mm.
you're discussing, and the employment. Yep. So it will be good to hear
We'll
your
cover that.
insights on
We'll
that. Yeah.
cover that in that our change in topic, another topic. But I think with the employment, I want to come back to employment now after housing. Employment is very critical as well. It is not just housing that we need stability. We need stability in employment. And the current situation, what the government implemented during COVID, when people lost their jobs, businesses, all sorts of things, they happened, there was a huge loss in employment as well. So, and what happened during that time is the government implemented a scheme called Through the Work and Income, was training people to change their profession, to change their skills to different. That was a good opportunity given at that time, so that people got back into the workforce or back into employment. So when people say that, like labor, as or labor political party, labor has not been good enough to give employment or employ people or even wages. I think what we have seen in the last 6 years, to be honest, is minimum wages increased every year, and that's the key. Secondly, they also, the unemployment, as you mentioned earlier, that unemployment has been down compared to other OECD countries. So that means they have managed and maintained. Yes, the cost of living has not come down. It is coming down, but not to the extent that matching with the wages. And the other prices are, of course, the other political parties are saying that is because you are spending, that's why the inflation has gone up. That's what they say. But then that spending, whether it is justifiable, not justifiable, fair or not fair, is needs to be, understood. And it needs to be understood by individual needs and individual requirements, that they were in that situation and circumstances, to make a judgment call whether those spending was good enough for them or not. Again, there are certain things which the political parties like ACT are saying there is a lot of wasteful spending that was done during that time. So like paying the consultants, paying the bureaucracy, paying the admin staff and all of that in all fields, which could be true for some extent, which may not be true to some extent. But at the end of the day, they all was spent in the name of whatever you call it, at the circumstances, the situation, and the COVID. So I think that was required and that was paid. The mortgages people had, they had to pay their mortgages. They maintained for 2 years. People could survive. As you said, we are in the survival mode. We haven't really come out of that mode yet, but we are coming slowly, because now at least we are not seeing now an unemployment has surged. So when the unemployment surges, when there is a lot of liquidation issues of selling their houses because they cannot afford, there when we can see that the recession will kick in, that we can see. Whether that is going to happen, whether that will be maintained by this current government the way they are maintaining now, is yet to be seen. But however, they are very much confident, the current government, that we are heading towards the right direction. So, but again, that's a perception or concept that they have put into place, which every voter has to, realize and make that call of which government currently is going to support them in such situation. When they got support when they need it. Now they have to see whether they can trust the same support that they will get, so that they can move and not like go back. That's all we have to see. So I think unemployment and employment is a very critical thing. And I think this scheme of training and also giving incentives to the employers to employ, is going to continue as per the current government. That's what I came to know, which means that they will keep check and manage the way they have managed during COVID. So I feel that I'm confident that they will manage the unemployment rate to the lowest that they can possibly have in this situation, and people will not have to spend or worry about spending on the basic things at least. Of course, there is a lot of issues about the basic cost, and we need a little bit of reformation. I personally feel the basic cost needs to be reformed, whether it is grocery, whether it is rent, whether it is mortgage, whether it is interest rate, has to be reformed, because you can't continue this for forever. Now, the question is how long this is going to continue, and how long the government is going to make the afford efforts and support the people for maintaining this cost or managing this cost of different
I
kinds.
think the couple of the smaller parties, like Green parties, emphasizing on universal income and welfare policies. ACT is talking about, reforming the employment opportunities, especially for people on benefits. So I think there are some interesting policies
Mm.
which might affect into employment in a positive way.
Yes, yes. I personally feel you're right. Absolutely right. So it is going to be very much interesting. But what we need basic for all the listeners, as we discussed earlier in our other episodes, is education, health,
Yeah,
employment, housing.
yeah,
These are all our basic fundamental requirements that needs to be taken care, because it was disturbed during COVID. Everything was disturbed. And fortunately, the current government was there, who did all of that, who has to do all that, because by
yeah.
default they were the governing political party. Now, after 6 years, they only managed, only last 2 years just went in the COVID, to be honest, if you ask me. But they also mosque terrorists, the volcano, they had and floods in this year, lots of challenges in 6 years that we faced. But we have not got into a recession in spite of all of that, completely out. I say that, when recession, we have seen worse recessions in different parts of the world. And luckily, after all of that, we still are in a stable situation where we can still move ahead. How to move ahead is a question that everybody has to think what they need now and what they need in the next day rather than after 2 days. So that's what my analysis would be, Shirali, in my 2 cents. If you want to ask me, employment is important, housing is important, health, education, everything is important. And we are just touching on this to give our perspectives, the analysis
Yeah.
that we do.
No,
Right?
I think you have very much covered all those areas. Thank you, Shailesh. Thank you very much for giving your insights into that. And we will have our final section in a very short time. Thank you.
Sure, sure, sure.